In the summer of 1942, the war in Europe seemed to hang on a single city on the Volga River. Stalingrad, now known as Volgograd, became the site of one of the largest and deadliest battles in military history. For months, German and Axis forces fought the Soviet Union in streets, factories, cellars, apartment blocks, and ruined stairwells. By the time the battle ended in February 1943, the German Sixth Army had been destroyed, the Fourth Panzer Army had suffered severe losses, and the strategic momentum of the war had shifted. Stalingrad was not just another battlefield. It became the place where Nazi Germany's advance into the Soviet Union was stopped, reversed, and exposed as vulnerable. To understand why Stalingrad mattered, it helps to look at Germany's situation before the battle. In 1941, Hitler had launched Operation Barbarossa, the massive invasion of the Soviet Union. The campaign brought German forces deep into Soviet territory, but it failed to deliver a quick victory. By 1942, Germany needed fuel desperately. Its armies were enormous, mechanized, and dependent on oil. Hitler's summer offensive aimed south, toward the oil fields of the Caucasus. Capturing those oil supplies could keep the German war machine running. But that southern campaign also required secure routes, protected flanks, and control over the Volga River, one of the Soviet Union's vital transport arteries. Stalingrad sat directly on that crucial Volga route. It was one of the Soviet Union's major industrial centers, producing military equipment and serving as a key hub for transportation and supply. If Germany captured the city, it could disrupt Soviet shipments along the river and help protect the wider German drive into the Caucasus. But Stalingrad also carried symbolic weight. The city bore the name of Joseph Stalin, the Soviet leader. For Hitler, taking it would be a propaganda triumph. For Stalin, losing it would be a political and psychological blow. This combination of strategic value and symbolism helped turn Stalingrad into a battlefield neither side wanted to abandon. The first major clashes began on July 17, 1942, when German forces encountered Soviet troops on the distant approaches to the city. The German advance was led by the Sixth Army, supported by elements of the Fourth Panzer Army. At first, the campaign followed a familiar pattern. German mobile forces pushed forward, trying to break Soviet defenses and drive toward the city. But the Soviet command understood the stakes. Even before the battle reached Stalingrad itself, Soviet resistance slowed the German timetable. The struggle became a contest of attrition, with both sides feeding men and equipment into a battle that was becoming more costly with every mile. On August 23, the battle entered a catastrophic new phase. The Luftwaffe launched massive bombing raids against Stalingrad, reducing much of the city to rubble. Civilians suffered terribly as homes, streets, and factories were destroyed from the air. But the destruction created a paradox for the Germans. The bombing devastated the city, yet the ruins also became defensive terrain. Piles of bricks, collapsed buildings, and shattered industrial complexes gave Soviet defenders countless places to hide, ambush, and resist. What had been an industrial city became a maze of obstacles. German tanks and aircraft could help, but they could not easily win a fight fought room by room. As German troops entered Stalingrad, the battle degenerated into some of the most brutal urban combat of the war. Soldiers fought for individual buildings, floors, staircases, and basements. A factory could change hands repeatedly. A single apartment block might become a fortress. The front line was sometimes so close that artillery and air support became difficult to use without hitting friendly troops. Soviet defenders clung to narrow positions and used the ruined landscape to offset German advantages in mobility and firepower. This kind of fighting was exhausting and intimate. It demanded constant alertness, punished every mistake, and consumed lives at a terrifying rate. By mid-November, the Germans had pushed the Soviet defenders back into narrow strips along the west bank of the Volga. From a distance, it looked as though Stalingrad might finally fall. The Germans controlled most of the city, but control was not the same as victory. The Soviet defenders still held on, supplied across the river under dangerous conditions. Reinforcements and ammunition crossed the Volga despite German fire and freezing weather. Meanwhile, the German army inside the city was becoming worn down. Every advance cost men, ammunition, and time. The battle had turned into a grinding struggle that favored the side able to endure longer. Winter made the situation even worse. Temperatures dropped far below freezing, and soldiers on both sides faced frostbite, hunger, exhaustion, and disease. The battle no longer resembled the fast-moving campaigns Germany had used earlier in the war. It became a frozen war of rubble and trenches, with men fighting from dugouts, cellars, and wrecked buildings. German troops were deep inside the city, but their flanks stretched across a vast front outside Stalingrad. Those flanks were not held mainly by the strongest German formations. They were guarded by Axis allied armies, including Romanian forces, which had fewer anti-tank weapons and were vulnerable to a major Soviet attack. The Soviet High Command recognized this weakness and prepared a massive counteroffensive. On November 19, 1942, the Red Army launched Operation Uranus. Instead of attacking the strongest German positions inside Stalingrad, Soviet forces struck the weaker Axis armies protecting the German flanks. It was a two-pronged attack, designed to break through north and south of the city and then link up behind the German Sixth Army. The plan was bold and devastatingly effective. Romanian defenses were overrun, Soviet armored units surged forward, and within days the German army fighting in Stalingrad found itself surrounded. The hunters had become the trapped. The encirclement created a crisis for Hitler and the German command. The German Sixth Army was still a powerful force, but it was trapped in a pocket with limited food, ammunition, fuel, and medical supplies. Some German commanders believed the army should attempt a breakout before it was too late. Hitler refused. Determined to hold Stalingrad at all costs, he ordered the Sixth Army to remain in place. The plan was to supply it by air while German forces outside the pocket attempted to break through. But the airlift could not deliver enough supplies. Bad weather, Soviet defenses, and the sheer scale of the army's needs made the effort impossible. For the trapped soldiers, the final weeks were a collapse in slow motion. Food ran short. Ammunition dwindled. Wounded men filled freezing shelters with little hope of evacuation. The Luftwaffe could not sustain the pocket, and relief attempts from outside failed to reach the surrounded army. Soviet forces tightened their grip, reducing the German-held area piece by piece. The battle that had begun as a German offensive for control of a strategic city had become a desperate fight for survival. By January 1943, the Sixth Army was no longer capable of meaningful offensive action. It was isolated, starving, and being crushed. On February 2, 1943, the remaining German forces in Stalingrad capitulated. The surrender was historic. It was the first time one of Hitler's field armies had surrendered. The consequences were enormous. Germany lost the Sixth Army, suffered severe damage to other formations, and saw Army Group be routed. The defeat ended Germany's 1942 summer offensive and shattered the idea that the Wehrmacht could simply force its way to victory in the East. From this point onward, the Soviet Union increasingly held the strategic initiative. Germany would still fight fiercely for more than 2 years, but after Stalingrad, the direction of the war had changed. Stalingrad became one of the defining turning points of World War II in Europe because it combined military, strategic, and psychological consequences. It stopped Germany's southern campaign, protected the Volga, and helped deny Hitler the Caucasus oil that had motivated the offensive. It also proved that the Red Army could not only survive a German assault but encircle and destroy a major German force. In Russia and other post-Soviet states, the victory remains part of the commemorated memory of the Great Patriotic War. Around the world, Stalingrad endures as a symbol of sacrifice, urban warfare, and the moment the Nazi war machine began to break. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.